Because of COVID-19, I'm stranded in Vietnam. Stay tuned to find out why I chose to be a guest of a foreign country during the pandemic. Hello beautiful people, my name is Justin. My lovely ride or die Lea, well, she's riding out the apocalypse in the United States. For those of you who don't know, Lea and I have been living and working abroad for nearly 4 years now, and we like to make videos about what our life's been like since we decided to get up, get out, and get gone. Today's video, we're talking about why I chose, yes it was a choice, why I chose to stay in Vietnam for the pandemic. As I said before, Lea is having her annual visit in the United States, and this time COVID-19, well, it's kept her there a lot longer than she expected. And that's created a reason for a lot of people to ask me, well, why aren't you in the States? Why didn't you join her? You know what? I chose to stay in Vietnam during the pandemic because I feel safer here than I do most anywhere else. Given Vietnam's proximity to China, it was inevitable that there would be reported cases of COVID-19 here in Vietnam. But Vietnam had a plan in place before there was even its first reported case. They had already dispatched health officials to the airports in anticipation of people coming in with COVID-19. In fact, when we returned from Taiwan, that's where we were when we heard about the outbreak, by the way. Lea and I were in Taiwan celebrating Chinese New Year. And let's talk about Taiwan for just a second. They have done an incredible job as well with dealing with COVID-19. Their proximity to China and their experience with SARS and H1N1, much like Vietnam, probably gives them a little bit of an upper hand. Nonetheless, they were quick to respond. When we were there and we were going into a museum, into malls, there were thermal cameras that would take our body temperature. We experienced those same thermal cameras when we landed in Hanoi. That gives you a sense of security right then and there. When you find out that the nation is already on top of preventing the outbreaks, you have a good feeling about it, right? Now granted, Vietnam does not have the same quality of health care as the United States, but then you have to think about, if I do catch it and I'm in the US, I don't have insurance in the US, could I afford treatment? Would I have access to treatment? In Vietnam, I guarantee you I would have access to treatment because as a privileged foreigner, as an expat if you will, they have no intentions of letting anyone bring about bad press to their efforts to fight COVID-19. So they're definitely going to give me the treatment that I need, kind of leaning heavily on that privilege, I understand. Nonetheless, that is what factored into my decision to stay here in Vietnam. A lot can be said for how quickly Vietnam responded, but also how effectively they responded. The central government created a narrative straight away that said we are at war with COVID-19. That's right, Vietnam versus COVID-19, which was great. That was what was needed to instill compliance voluntarily from the citizens. It unified this nation under one cause, and that cause was to defeat COVID-19. Certainly we had our own lockdown here. It wasn't too heavy-handed, but it was all-inclusive. There was a curfew. Everyone had to wear a mask or face fines. You know, it was enough to get people to reconsider going out without a mask. Can't say that everyone complied 100%, but for the most part, everyone did a pretty good job. Only essential businesses were opened, so you could go to the pharmacy, you could go to the grocery store, and you could also get your motorbike washed, because that's important here in Vietnam. You gotta have a clean whip, for sure. There's this preconceived notion that it's very easy for Vietnam to close its borders, to close its schools, to shut down its economy because it is this single-party, authoritarian, communist country. Yes and no. Anyone who's actually lived in Vietnam can understand that there is a certain sense of lawlessness that people engage in every day. So you have the Vietnam that's on paper, and then you have the lived experience. And I'm here to tell you that those two seldom ever meet. However, with the top-down narrative that the central government put out, that COVID-19 and Vietnam were at war, I think it really unified the people and it brought everyone together so that there was voluntary compliance. And you need voluntary compliance to get the kind of social distancing measures implemented that are required to flatten the curve. it's something we just can't seem to do in the States. And that's, if we go into detail about the lockdown measures, do I as an American feel that like my liberties were violated? No. I felt like I was doing my part. I felt like I was doing what was not only expected of me as a guest in Vietnam, but just out of the decency for the person next to me, the person down the hall, the person at the grocery store. I didn't want to infect that person should I have it. I didn't want them to infect me should they have it. So everyone, for the most part, I can't say everyone, for the most part, people did a pretty good job at staying in the house and staying home, keeping to themselves. Which in a country where people are piled on top of each other and personal space is a foreign concept, I was rather impressed that they were able to do that. And again, I think it was that narrative passed down from the central government that this is a war and Vietnam's going to win. Now, with regards to Vietnam's reporting on the number of COVID-19 cases and the 0 casualties, that may or may not be true. I'm not in a position to actually call them out for lying. I'm definitely not an apologist for the Vietnamese government. They definitely did put a little element of fear into the people about this, which, there was a little blowback on some foreigners. They made it seem like all foreigners were bringing this in. And so some people, got a little backlash from the Vietnamese and some maltreatment, but the government was quick to nip that in the bud too, because tourism is such an important form of income for the Vietnamese economy that you wanted to make sure that the expats and the visitors were taken care of. They just don't want any deaths. Vietnam wants to walk away from this saying, we won. Again, people think it's easy for Vietnam to be able to shut down its borders, close its economy, and enforce social distancing measures because of the type of government that they are. But I recently read a Brookings Institute report that suggests Vietnam actually has another narrative that's not being told. It shows that there has been a decades plus effort to increasing compliance in regional governance and central governance. So they're actually communicating better. It's as if the provinces have become competitive to see who can comply best. There's also been an effort to curb corruption. Corruption has gone down, and that's something that's not being talked about. There's been an effort to actually increase the professionalism and the quality of healthcare and access to healthcare for all Vietnamese citizens. So what you have is this unification of all the governing systems working together. Do you hear that, America? That would be like the states and the White House coming together and agreeing on a plan on how to battle COVID-19. And it was not politicized here the way that it was politicized in America. It's just not. It is a public health issue that is addressed through the CDC and the Ministry of Health first and foremost. And then the rest of the governing bodies get involved. Well, you go to the medical professionals, you listen to them, you do what they say, you let it trickle down, and voila, you have a country that has whipped COVID-19's ass. I certainly understand that a lot of Americans are living with a high level of uncertainty of what the future holds. And it's unfortunate that so many people are suffering and so many people are dying in the States right now. I do see that there will be something to learn from this for everyone. I know that I've learned a lot about not only myself, but about how to be a respectful guest in another country, about a better understanding of what a communist government looks like and how it operates, and realizing that while there are certain conditions under which I would not want to live my life or have been educated or have been raised, I can say that how Vietnam came together to fight COVID-19 was less about being a communist country and more about being a country that had a plan. They had a plan, they implemented it, people followed the plan, the curve flattened, Vietnam won. It's that simple. For those of you who questioned why I stayed, I ain't mad at you. Not at all. It's not questions I didn't ask myself initially, but I also know that a lot of what was fueling people's desire for me to come home, well, some of it was simply love. They wanted to see me, and I appreciate that. But some of it was fueled by a little bit of misunderstanding and, dare I say, ignorance of how life actually functions here in Vietnam. Because what you read in the headlines, what you think you know about the government, it's not what's lived day to day. It's not how this country actually functions. So that's why we travel. That's one of the reasons I know that I travel. I can't speak for Lea. Lea, still in America. But I'm pretty sure she'll say that the reason we travel is because we learn, not only about other people and other things and other experiences, but mostly we learn about ourselves. And that's the best part of traveling. And I have learned a lot. I have learned a lot during this COVID-19 pandemic. And I hope everyone else has a learning experience despite all the tragedy. And, you know, let's keep ourselves healthy. Let's do the best that we can to take care of each other. And I'll ask it because Leah's not here to ask it. Her favorite question to leave with all of our viewers: when was the last time you did something for the first time? Remember, it's never too late to get up, get out, and get going.